Amazing transformation. Hidden drunk millionaire emerges from garbage, discovered by a poor hero. Every evening, Jake stared at the high school's flickering fluorescent lights, feeling the hum of discontent deep within his bones. At 28, he was stuck in a cycle of mopping floors and emptying trash, trapped in a world he couldn't escape. His dreams of architecture felt like ghosts, haunting him as he scrubbed each surface to a dull shine. With every gesture, he sensed the weight of his father's lessons on integrity and perseverance pressing against his chest, a reminder of what he could have been. The taste of ambition turned bitter, and fear snaked through him. What if he never broke free? Jake grappled with this tedium, the daily grind consuming him, dragging his spirit further down each hour. He tossed around the very definitions of worth, wrestling with the urge to abandon thoughts of the future in favor of survival. Yet his father's voice lingered in his mind, urging him to maintain hope. He could picture the blueprints cascading from his fingers, the thrill of design enveloping him. But life in the small town wrapped him tighter in its claws, squeezing until he lost sight of those dreams. Who was he kidding? As janitor, he felt like a ghost, seen but overlooked, destined for dirt. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. It was on an unremarkable afternoon, one that felt indistinguishable from the rest, that Jake ventured into the local warehouse. He discovered Charlie huddled in the shadows, surrounded by remnants of a life once rich with promise. The sight twisted in Jake's stomach, pulling him closer. The disheveled man rummaged through scraps of his past, echoing a broken melody of loss and solitude. Memories of happier times clung to the air, and Jake felt a tug on his heart, compassion swelling to drown his apprehensions. For the first time, the mundane facade of his janitorial life shattered as he engaged in heartfelt conversations with Charlie, unearthing stories of entrepreneurial glory and turbulent spirals of despair. Each revelation tugged at Jake's very foundation. But as whispers of Charlie's past began seeping into the town, Jake's heart dropped. People loved to judge, scrutinizing every opportunity to point fingers. A visceral fear fused within him. As a town meeting approached, Jake's desperation grew. Would they see Charlie's shattered hope? Would they understand? As he pictured the crowd, faces hardened with disdain, he found himself rehearsing the words he would fight to say, caught between loyalty to his troubled friend and the instinct to escape. Would he stand in defiance, risking the wrath of the community? As anger and unease churned within him, the shadows of the warehouse danced ominously in his mind. The stakes soared. Charlie's redemption and Jake's dreams dangled on this knife's edge, their fates perilously intertwined. Would he summon the courage to confront the threads of judgment, or would he sink beneath the weight of doubt? The tension crackled in the air, and as Jake stood on the precipice of a life-altering stand, he shared a glance with Charlie, the looming storm of community expectations casting a foreboding shadow. Jake clenched his fists as he paced the worn wooden floor of the warehouse, every creak sounding like a ticking clock, counting down the moments until the town meeting. Memories of Charlie's stories played over in his mind, a tapestry of failure and tenacity woven with desperation. Jake felt the aching pulse of empathy coursing through him, but the prospect of confronting the town's judgment tightened his throat. He was terrified, not just of their disdain for Charlie, but of what it would mean for him. What if he was judged alongside a man marred by his past? The flickering lights above blurred as he fought back the anxiety rising in his chest. It was not just about Charlie anymore. It was about Jake, too. He was standing at a crossroads, the choice to step into the shadows of fear or to step into the light of possibility. As he warred with himself, Jake unearthed an ember of determination. His father's unwavering belief in integrity echoed louder than the whispers of doubt. Perhaps this was the moment he could prove to himself he wasn't just a ghost in the corridors of life. Taking a deep breath, Jake made a decision. He wouldn't cower behind judgment. He had to speak, to make the town see Charlie not as a failure, but as a man deserving of compassion and understanding. He could feel the buried dreams of architecture beginning to stir within him, awakening as if assessing the current state of his existence. Jake envisioned the intricate designs he loved, the thrill of creation, and for the first time, he wondered if he could build a future not just for himself, but for Charlie too. Yet doubt nestled tightly in his mind. How could he genuinely stand for someone else when he felt so lost himself? The juxtaposition of his janitorial reality against the ambition festering within ignited a flicker of anger. No longer would he let fear strip him of his voice. That night, the warehouse filled with a sense of preparation, a need to advocate blossoming alongside the lingering shadows of uncertainty. As the town meeting approached, Jake gathered his thoughts, rehearsing lines over and over in his head. Each iteration brought clarity, but also exposed the raw, jagged edges of vulnerability. He realized it wasn't just about defending Charlie anymore. It was a path to reclaiming his own identity. Would they see him as less than worthy because of his path? The moment felt monumental, as if every janitorial sweep had led him to this precipice. Each flick of the broom had been a silent statement, asserting his existence in a world that often overlooked the people like him, the unseen workers filled with dreams. The evening of the meeting loomed, an unshakable weight pressing down on him. As the voices of the town echoed in his mind, he could almost imagine the mingling of hostility in the air. What if his words fell flat? What if he stumbled? But deep inside, Jake felt a stirring resolve. It wasn't merely about the outcome, it was about standing firm in one's beliefs, about peeling back layers of indifference and revealing humanity. With a final breath, he mentally prepared himself for the confrontation. That night, the meeting would either shatter or illuminate his reality, but either way, he was ready to build a new foundation. The moment of truth was arriving. He felt it like a spark, waiting to catch fire. Jake realized he was no longer grappling with who he was, but had begun to claim a vision of who he could become. As he stepped into the meeting room, the tension coiled around him, a palpable presence. What he didn't know, however, was that he was about to uncover another hidden truth about himself, one that would challenge the very fabric of his perceived limitations. The time had come to face not only the judgments of others, but also the strengths buried within his very soul. What would he discover amidst the chaos of that room? Jake stepped into the meeting room, his heart pounding like a war drum in his chest. As the door swung shut behind him, cutting off the dim outside light, a murmur cascaded through the gathered townsfolk. Eyes turned toward him, some curious, some scrutinizing, and a few openly hostile. He felt the anxious weight of their gaze pressing down like a physical burden. This was it. He was finally here, on this precipice of possibility, ready to speak for Charlie and, in many ways, for himself. He clutched a set of notes in his trembling hands, the ink slightly smudged from his nervous grip. Each word felt both like armor and a shackle. Jake desperately sought clarity in his thoughts, recalling the vast potential that architectural dreams had once promised him. If only he could channel that into this moment. The dim lights overhead flickered, mirroring his apprehension. As the meeting began, the mayor, a stern man with a sharp gaze, bypassed small talk.
We are here to discuss the recent misdoings of Charlie Turner. The words hung heavy, and Jake's pulse quickened. It was now or never. Steeling himself, he took a step forward. "Wait!" His voice, though shaky, cut through the thick atmosphere. The whispers quieted down, all eyes now on him. Gathering his strength, he spoke. "Before we
Judge Charlie, let's remember that everyone has a story. A moment of weakness shouldn't define a man." As he spoke, he felt the weight of their skepticism pressing on his shoulders, but he pushed through. Each word became clearer, more powerful. It was a plunge into the depths of vulnerability, but alongside the tremor, there was a rising wave of conviction. Voices from the crowd interjected with questions, taunts, and even jeers, but Jake faced them head-on, transcending their doubts with a growing sense of purpose. "I grew up in this town, just like all of you. I've mopped the floors and cleaned the streets, and sometimes I've lost sight of who I am behind those tasks. But Charlie, he's not just his past. He's a man who tried to rise above it, and I stand here today because I believe in the power of second chances." His voice resonated against the walls, striking chords he didn't know he could play. With every minute that passed, Jake unearthed parts of himself he hadn't known existed. His nervousness transformed into passion, fueling him. The laughter he heard was no longer debilitating. It felt like a challenge, inviting him to dig deeper. He could sense the shift in energy around him, a few nods, some shifting in their seats. This wasn't merely about Charlie anymore. It was him stepping into the light, claiming his identity and worth. But amidst this surge, doubt still lingered. What if he failed? The fear of their judgment loomed like a shadow waiting to engulf him. Could he truly be strong enough to break through the barrier of indifference that held his community? As he finished his speech, a spark of courage ignited within him. But instead of relief, a new uncertainty bubbled to the surface. What would be the outcome? Would his words resonate or fall into oblivion? In that crucial moment, he noticed Charlie in the back, his eyes gleaming with a mixture of hope and fear. A silent understanding passed between them, a connection woven from shared struggles, awaiting transformation. The unease coiling within Jake changed shape. It was now tinted with anticipation for what could unfold. As the room erupted into murmurs, he knew this was just the beginning. What other parts of himself had yet to surface? What unknown strengths were still buried beneath the weight of societal judgment? As he stood at the heart of this tumultuous gathering, Jake understood that the journey of self-discovery was far from over. He was only just beginning to carve out a space for his true self. And in that moment, the real confrontation awaited, not from the townsfolk, but from within. What hidden capacities lay dormant, waiting for him to unearth them amid chaos? Jake's heart raced as whispers surged through the crowd like restless waves. He couldn't shake the feeling that an invisible barrier remained between him and the understanding he craved from the townsfolk. They were still judging him, tethering him to a past he had long tried to shed. If he was to find his footing in this tumultuous sea of uncertainty, he would have to paddle harder, confront the looming specter of self-doubt that crowded his mind. He stepped back, allowing the room's chatter to wash over him. Charlie's gaze bore into him, a reminder of why he stood there. It ignited something deep within, a recognition of shared humanity echoed by the depths of their separate struggles. Jake had started the day merely as a voice for someone else, but now he was wrestling with the implications of his own worthiness. What if his words didn't just resonate for Charlie, but rang true for himself? Shaking off those turbulent thoughts, Jake began to ponder the essence of what he had communicated. It was more than just defending the man he admired. It was an awakening to his suppressed aspirations. The echoes of his past ambitions as an architect moved to the forefront of his mind. Designs that envisioned triumph over adversity, spaces that celebrated second chances. But reality set in with a crushing weight. What obligations did he have left to the mundanity of life? He recalled the years in which he'd suppressed his ambitions for stability, cleaning, serving, maintaining the status quo. No more, Jake decided. If his speech had resonated, even slightly, it wouldn't just elevate Charlie, it would reveal the multifaceted layers of his desire to engage with life in a meaningful way. As the murmurs morphed into heated exchanges around him, the voices blended into a chaotic rhythm. Jake felt an urge to stifle it all and reflect internally. He rushed to the window, half crazed by the search for clarity. Outside, the early evening sun painted the horizon in hues of gold and crimson, a promise of potential. With newfound determination, he turned back towards the room. This wasn't just about others witnessing a glimpse of his tenacity. It was about solidifying it in his own soul. He stepped back to the front of the room, voice steady as he commanded the attention once more. Let's reconsider how we define each other. Mistakes are but stepping stones rather than prisons. Before he could complete his thought, a conflicting voice chided from the rear. You think you're so high and mighty after one speech? It was Sam, a local skeptic known for his biting remarks. The crowd stirred, eyes darting between Jake and the man who had challenged him. The words sliced through his resolve, yet something profound ignited within him. This moment could either drown him or fortify him. Speak what you feel, Jake replied, calm but unwavering. If my words ruffle feathers, let's discuss it. Isn't that why we're here, to explore and question rather than bury our heads in the sand? He'd pushed the door open, and the collective gasp made it clear that they hadn't expected this from him. There was power in vulnerability, and here was Jake confronting his fear like a storm-brave sailor navigating uncharted waters. But there was still uncertainty about where his newfound courage would lead. Even now, he was carving out his own identity, yet how much more remained to be uncovered? The momentum he felt, the rush of possibility, was intoxicating, but also laced with the fear of failure. In those fleeting moments, he was at once a hero rising to his own occasion and a man unsteady on the path to self-discovery. Would this confrontation with Sam become a catalyst for further exploration of his own strengths? Jake wasn't just standing up for Charlie anymore. He was confronting his own demons and embracing a path he had neglected for too long. Every challenge sparked a new question. Could he truly transform his eager aspirations into tangible actions? As the crowd's energy coiled and shifted, awaiting the next move, Jake braced for impact. The time had come to face not only his detractors, but to stake his claim in the world beyond mere survival. What other obstacles would emerge as he continued this journey toward authentic self-definition? Jake stood at the forefront of the room, the buzzing anticipation of the townsfolk swirling around him like a charged storm. Sam's words, resonant with skepticism, echoed in his mind, stirring the cauldron of his insecurities. Was this a fool's errand, stepping up like this? Or was it the exact challenge he so desperately needed? He took a deep breath, letting the air fill his lungs. Still facing Sam, he felt himself sink into the role of facilitator rather than foe. Let's delve deeper then, Jake suggested, his tone measured yet bold. What makes you uncomfortable about my perspective? Sam folded his arms, a defiant gesture, yet Jake detected a flicker of interest behind the bravado. The crowd shifted, now leaning in rather than retreating, intrigued by this public duel of minds. Was it possible to transform skepticism into dialogue? Jake's pulse quickened. This was no longer about confrontation. It was a chance for revelation. Sam began spewing critiques, probing Jake's vulnerabilities as if hunting for weaknesses. Each jab landed like the crack of a whip, reigniting old fears and self-doubt. What if he wasn't ready for this scrutiny? But Jake felt something else stirring within him, the will to assert his beliefs and confront his past responsibly.
As Sam laid out his views on failure, success, and societal judgment, Jake sensed transformations occurring not just within himself, but in the audience. Their expressions shifted from skepticism to curiosity. He could see it. Some were nodding, others leaning forward, eager for Jake to respond. The battle was evolving into a collaborative exploration. "Let's consider this," Jake projected, channeling his newfound confidence. "You, me, all of us here, aren't we pieces of a complex puzzle? Each of us carries burdens, harbors regrets, but we also possess dreams. Isn't the essence of life to embrace all these facets? Our stumbles, our vulnerabilities, aren't they what connect us?" The room fell into a contemplative silence, and Jake used it as a moment to gather his thoughts.
Before pressing on, my ambitions as an architect weren't just about buildings. It was about creating spaces that offered hope, healing, and opportunities for others. If I'm to truly do that, I must also confront my own dreams, my past, and yes, even the possibility of failure. The spotlight had shifted. Jake was no longer simply defending his worth, he was embodying it. The fear that had once clouded his ambition was being replaced with clarity. He had detached himself from the expectations of the crowd, transforming their judgment into fuel for his growth. Every single one of us has the power to reshape our narrative. Sam, your critiques are necessary. They challenge me to reflect and strengthen my resolve. But what if we all embrace these discussions as chances for growth? Jake felt the words ricochet off the walls, invigorating him with each passing second. As the dialogue unfolded, he found himself engaging not just with Sam, but with the crowd. In attributing mutual respect to differing views, he leaned into his feelings of vulnerability, a strength he had previously shunned. They were each other's mirrors, reflecting the complexities of life. But as the intensity of the room began to subside, a gnawing thought clenched at the edges of his mind. Was he truly ready for confrontation? Jake hadn't erased his fears. They lingered still, lurking in the shadows of his courage. The energy was palpable. This was just the beginning. The next challenge awaited. Jake felt the pull of destiny as he considered the myriad pathways stretching before him. Would this budding confidence withstand the trials that lay ahead? What fresh obstacles awaited him on this journey as he began to set forth into the uncharted territories of his aspirations? In that pivotal moment, Jake made a silent promise to himself. He would seek not just to confront, but to evolve, to genuinely uncover the hidden layers of his own potential as he forged ahead. Yet doubt lingered, like an uninvited guest, teasing at the back of his mind as he grasped the weight of the path he was about to choose. The crowd resumed murmuring, a mixture of contemplation and admiration swirling in the air. Jake gazed around, his heart racing with an unfamiliar mix of excitement and anxiety. The time had come to peel back his layers and face the truth he wasn't yet ready to confront. How far would he go in this pursuit of authenticity? And how would he respond to the revelations of his own past as it clawed back into the present? The murmur of the crowd faded into an echo as Jake stepped back from the improvised stage. The anticipation of what would happen next tinged the air, mingling with his own adrenaline. The exhilarating dopamine rush of the spotlight gave way to a chill of uncertainty creeping back in. Each heart in the room thudded in coordination with his, creating a shared rhythm of curiosity about the man who had just laid bare his conviction. Jake wandered through the throng, watching faces transform from skepticism to something softer, perhaps even reverence. Yet beneath this intrigue, an undercurrent of dread gnawed at him. He understood this moment as significant, a phase of awakening. But how would he navigate the depth of introspection that awaited him when the applause faded? When the crowd returned to their ordinary lives, would he still be capable of maintaining this evolved mindset? He paused, finding a corner at the back of the room, where it felt quieter, protected from the charged atmosphere. Here he could breathe. The words he spoke to Sam still resonated within him. We all possess dreams. It bathed him in a soft glow of inspiration. But what lay on the other side of that glimmer? What if his past, heavy with the darkness of unfulfilled ambition and regret, weighed him down when the spotlight dimmed? As he mulled over these thoughts, Jake instinctively reached for his phone, tapping through contacts, trying to find someone, anyone, to anchor him in this surreal experience. He paused over the name of his mentor, Paul. Deciding it was too vulnerable to reach out in this moment of raw uncertainty, he couldn't help but long for the older architect's presence. Paul was a fortress of wisdom, yet also a testament to patience. Perhaps he would remind him that authenticity was a journey, not a destination. But the self-doubt returned, dragging curiosity with it. Was he about to unveil more truths about himself than he could handle? Turning to face the half-familiar faces, Jake caught glimpses of Sam, who was exchanging remarks with a few onlookers, their expressions animated with renewed enthusiasm for the debate. Sam's willingness to push Jake had ignited a flicker of connection among them, and Jake could see the pathways opening before him, branching outward from this moment. "Your honesty lit a fire, didn't it?" A voice broke through his reverie. Adventure, an old classmate turned journalist, now eyeing Jake with newfound admiration. "You seemed genuinely ready to engage. That's bold in front of everyone." Jake smiled, feeling a rush of appreciation for this acknowledgement. "Thank you, Adventure. I think sharing that part of me was as much for me as it was for them. But what's next? What do I do with this?" His voice quaked slightly, revealing his apprehension. "Well," she chuckled softly, "you could explore that, collect their reactions, learn from it. You're on the threshold of something significant, and it's a choice you have to make yourself. That's where real evolution comes, you know." There was a ring of truth in her words. Jake's facade had cracked open, revealing a glimpse of the man he could grow into, but the shadows of fear loomed still, whispering doubts. Diving deeper into this exploration would necessitate confronting uncomfortable memories, the architecture of his childhood, the dimensions of old failures. Would he venture down that road? Jake felt an electrifying pulse wake him to the possibilities around him.
The once distant echoes of his dreams beckoned him. He could feel it deep within, a determination to navigate this maze of realization and find something hidden but powerful within. As he unveiled another layer of himself, he was stepping closer towards revelation. Jake turned from adventure, focusing on the murmurs swelling around him and sampling the weight of each exchange. The seeds of boldness were sown. He needed to cultivate them. Would he risk showcasing his vulnerabilities to peel back the thick layers of his failures and reconstruct them into a foundation strong enough for the aspirations that awaited him? With a resolute expression, he decided to delve deeper into his past, preparing to face the very moments that had shaped him, the triumphs and the tragic missteps. But was he prepared for the truth lurking there? Would reconciling with those shadows empower him or drive him further into the abyss? Determined yet anxious, he stepped back into the thrumming epicenter of lives shifting around him, ready to inquire further. As the energy surged, Jake wondered, could he unearth his buried potential before it was too late? Jake moved deeper into the crowd. The dynamic interplay of voices surrounding him felt more like a tide, pulling him toward uncharted waters. Each conversation echoed remnants of thoughts he'd long suppressed, faces of doubt, echoes of laughter, and whisperings of dreams unlived. He had just poured his heart out, revealing a part of himself that was nearly foreign. What lay ahead was both terrifying and thrilling. He caught a glimpse of Sam, still radiating a contagious energy. Sam's passion inspired admiration, stirring Jake's resolve. He approached, hoping to mirror some of that brightness. "Do you really think I can explore this?" Jake asked, hesitation threading his voice. "Absolutely. You've opened the door," Sam replied, his eyes alight with conviction. "Taking the next step is when it gets messy, but that's where you'll discover the real you." The prospect of messiness churned in Jake's stomach. For too long, he'd wandered along the polished surfaces of his architectural career, avoiding the gravity of past failures. That ache from earlier swelled again, moments he'd stifled rather than acknowledged. What if those memories could be transmuted into something productive?
Driven by a sudden impulse, he sought out a quiet nook in the venue. Every heartbeat pounded in his ears. This was it. Understanding himself was not merely a journey for personal satisfaction, it was essential for the architect he wanted to be. He slid down against a wall, trying to process everything. Could he really confront the past and weave it into a vision? Jake breathed deeply, the air filling his lungs with renewed determination. A half-remembered incident from his childhood rushed back, an abandoned project with his father, where creativity failed to meet practicality, leaving shards and disappointment scattered like rubble. Would that moment serve as a launchpad or trouble him further? Embracing this recollection, he felt a thread of courage weaving through his fears. In a moment of clarity, Jake took out his notebook, the constant companion he'd ignored for too long. He opened it to a blank page, letting instinct guide his pen. "What did I learn from my failures?" he wrote, the words carving a path forward as they spilled out. Each recognition ignited small flames of insight. His father's struggles mirrored his own current anxieties. As he wrote, a path formed, starting from painful memories and leading towards a hopeful horizon. He saw now that navigating through his past was less about dwelling in sorrow and more about crafting resilience. A faint smile crossed his lips. This could be a blueprint for change, an architectural ethos rising from the ashes of regret. With renewed vigor swelling in his chest, Jake considered what he'd unearthed. This was more than reflection. It was about creating from where he had come. Could confronting his past fractures help others find their own strength? As interest ignited within him, he sensed an almost magnetic draw to share this newfound insight, an urge to connect. Emerging from his introspection, he scanned the gathering around him, a sea of eager faces busy with dialogue. The potential for collaboration shimmered enticingly. First, he would reach Sam, share this, and from there build something transcendent from their combined experiences. The doubts still whispered at the corners of his mind, but the symphony of encouragement ringing in his heart muted their vicious tones. Before he could second-guess himself, he stepped forward into the flow once more, adventure and uncertainty intertwining seamlessly. Yet as he navigated toward Sam, a chilling thought pierced through his resolve. What if opening these doors led to more trauma instead of triumph? What skeletons might he disturb within himself or those around him? Reaching Sam, Jake felt the weight of his decision pressing heavily against his shoulders. "Can we talk?" he said, determination crackling in his voice. "Of course," Sam replied, curiosity alight in his eyes. Jake took a deep breath, preparing to unveil the vulnerable, unfinished tapestry of his ambitions and missteps. Would this path truly lead him to an awakening, or would he instead find himself ensnared within the past? One thing was clear: the time had come to face what lay shadowed beneath the surface. Behind every revelation hovered the specter of doubt, taunting him to reconsider. As they stepped away from the crowd, Jake felt the boundary between his past and future shimmering, a thin veil waiting to be pierced. What awaited them on the other side? Would the confrontation reveal more than he was willing to confront? Once they settled into a quieter corner, Sam's eager smile met Jake's anxious eyes. The lively chatter around them faded, replaced by the weight of unspoken thoughts. Jake shifted his focus, his internal conflict palpable as he wrestled with the gravity of what he was about to share. "Look," Sam said, picking up on Jake's hesitation, "we don't have to dive into anything right away. Just tell me what's on your mind." Jake's heart raced. This moment was critical. "I want to talk about what I've been avoiding," he began, voice slightly trembling. "I realized that I've let my past failures dictate my present. I've been playing it safe, but it's become suffocating. I don't want that anymore." Sam leaned in closer, his expression shifting from curiosity to deep understanding. "What made you confront it now?" Jake glanced down at his notebook, the pages filled with the raw thoughts that freshly poured from his pen. I've spent too much time in my architectural bubble, believing I could just build the future without examining the foundation. It's like I've forgotten that every structure needs its flaws acknowledged to truly stand strong. As he spoke, Jake could feel the tension easing slightly in Sam's presence. The conversation began to whirl around them, merging past reflections with present ambitions. "I want to turn these scars into something meaningful," he continued, his passion igniting as he saw Sam nodding. "I think that by working through my history, I can help others too. Maybe I could open a forum or workshop, a way to share experiences with similar struggles." "Jake, that's brilliant!" Sam exclaimed, the genuine excitement in his voice resonating through Jake's uncertainty. "You have so much to offer. Remember, the messy parts of our stories are often the most transformative. Imagine if you could guide someone facing the same fears you've had." Jake felt an electrifying spark ignite within him, a nascent hope tethered by both fear and exhilaration. His fingers fidgeted with the edges of his notebook, contemplating how this idea could materialize. "But what if I fail? What if my insights don't resonate? What skeletons might I bring to light that others aren't ready to face?" Sam's expression shifted to a more serious tone. "What's the worst that could happen? Stagnation? Staying silent? You've let this dwell within you for too long. Your experiences are valid, and sharing them could empower not only you, but others as well." The weight of Sam's words pressed on Jake. Any confrontation would expose vulnerabilities, not just in himself, but within the narratives of those willing to listen. The fear of disappointing himself loomed large, its claws digging deep. But beneath it was the glimmer of possibility, developing a legacy shaped by resilience rather than avoidance. "What if I could channel this fear into something constructive?" Jake questioned aloud, as if testing the waters of his awakening thought. "This is a chance to reshape how I define success, from building structures to building connections." "Yes, exactly," Sam urged. "This is not just about you. It's about creating a ripple effect. You know you're capable of it. Lean into that discomfort. The exploration of vulnerability can build stronger bonds." Jake's resolve began to solidify. Empowering others through the sharing of his story felt increasingly achievable, but the stakes felt higher as he explored these new territories. What energies would emerge when he finally let himself be seen, the messiness of his journey laid bare?
Public consumption? Just then, as if on cue, Jake caught sight of a group across the room animatedly discussing something, their enthusiasm infectious yet daunting. A pang of anxiety ricocheted inside him, the visceral awareness of what he was about to attempt clawing at his gut. "Let's take that plunge together," Sam suggested, breaking Jake from his spiral of self-doubt. "Connect people through vulnerability. You can start small. Next week, open up to a few colleagues about this. Let them see you." Jake was almost ready to nod in agreement when another chilling thought surfaced. Was he prepared to confront not just his past, but those who had witnessed his failures firsthand? Sharing would mean unearthing memories better left buried. Could he truly guide others when he felt so unsteady himself? As if sensing his turmoil, Sam placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "The first step is all that matters. Just imagine what's on the other side of that fear." Jake's heart swelled as he considered the journey before him, the horizon ahead beginning to shimmer with tantalizing possibilities. But looming within that excitement was the persistent specter of doubt, lingering to remind him of all he had to navigate, and the heaviness of what awaited in those uncharted depths. What would it take for him to turn this self-doubt into a catalyst for transformation? Would he have the strength to lead others while he learned to lead himself through that darkness? As resolution flickered in his mind, Jake understood that the next step would be a defining moment, one veiled in uncertainty, yet rife with the promise of change. The next morning, Jake awoke with an urgency pressing against his chest. The rising sun cast an orange hue across his room, illuminating the scattered papers on his desk, notes, sketches, and ideas that had been too long left dormant. Today was not just another day. It was the beginning of something new. As he stared at his reflection in the mirror, he felt the weight of his commitment. It was one thing to think about sharing his story, but the reality of that first tentative step loomed ahead like an intimidating project outline filled with potential pitfalls. Driven by a newfound determination, Jake took a deep breath. "Today," he muttered to himself, "I'm going to reach out." With each stroke of his toothbrush, he practiced the words that felt foreign, yet necessary. Meeting colleagues in his office brought its own set of complications. Inspiration was one thing, but vulnerability was on another level, the heart of the matter he'd so long avoided. As he navigated through the workday, a multitude of distractions attempted to pull him away from his goal. Meetings blended into casual conversations where he listened but remained distant, locked away in his thoughts. Who would listen? How would he begin? Simple words transformed into barriers, forming walls he had built over years of unaddressed anxieties. That afternoon, while seated at his desk fiddling with a sketch of a proposed community center, an idea sparked in his mind. He was known for designing spaces that fostered connection. Why not apply that same principle to his personal journey? His sketches were imbued with a thorough understanding of how physical environments could shape lives. Perhaps he could craft an environment for emotional exchanges as well. For several hours, he poured his thoughts into an email to a handful of colleagues. There was an inherent risk in making himself vulnerable, but he recognized this was a necessary part of constructing the foundation of his new endeavor. A few simple lines formed. "I believe that by sharing our experiences and struggles, we might forge connections that help us grow stronger both personally and professionally. Would anyone be interested in joining me for an informal discussion next week? Just us, no judgments." Jake hit send and felt a wave lift from his shoulders. Would they respond positively? Would anyone care enough to join him in this uncharted territory? Those questions sat heavy in his mind, but were eclipsed by a flicker of excitement. He needed this, not just for them, but for himself. Later on, he found himself skimming the responses. A few colleagues expressed their support, sharing their own willingness to engage in the discussion. Each response warmed him like a ray of sunlight breaking through a cloud. He could almost hear Sam's voice echoing the reassurance of how vital it was to lean into this fear. Just as Jake began envisioning details about the informal gathering, a familiar face turned the corner into the office. Laura, the analytical project manager who always seemed to be at the top of everything, paused at his desk. She peered at him, her brows slightly creased, as though she were about to unveil a difficult truth. "Jake, can we talk?" The request sent a jolt of nerves down his spine. What would she want to discuss? His heart raced. Was this moment the confrontation he had been waiting for? He nodded, motioning her to sit. As she settled into the chair across from him, Jake's mind began swirling with possibilities. Perhaps she would criticize his previous work or question his authority. Or maybe she was sensing the changes he was trying to embark upon. "What's on your mind, Laura?" he asked, attempting to sound casual despite the internal turmoil. "I've been hearing things," she began slowly, hesitating as if weighing her words. "About your potential workshop. I think it's a great idea, but it also might shake things up. Not everyone is ready to confront those kinds of discussions." Jake's pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" She continued cautiously. "You have to be prepared for pushback. Not everyone will appreciate being exposed to personal vulnerabilities. Some may see it as a breach of professionalism or the kind of thing that could compromise reputations." Her words landed heavily, winding into his thoughts with a chill. Was he truly ready to deal with that backlash? Could he sustain this journey when the reactions swung darker than he anticipated? Laura's perspective exposed a raw nerve, guiding Jake into a new level of self-reflection. He considered how important it was to navigate this new terrain with not just courage but strategy. A network could anchor him as he ventured deeper into the core of vulnerability and connection. As their conversation unfolded, Jake realized this was not just a warning, but an opportunity, a chance to bolster his resolve and prepare himself for the challenges that lay ahead. But would it be enough to keep him steady as he pushed the boundaries of his comfort? Suddenly, with that thought, a deeper question emerged in his mind. What if the backlash he feared was not simply external? What if it was a reflection of his internal struggles, a doubt in his capacity to lead? Jake felt the tension mounting once again, pulling him into an internal storm. With a heart pounding like a drum, he recognized that the journey had just begun, and the stakes would only escalate from here. What if he challenged those boundaries not only for others, but as a means to reclaim his own power? As he faced this uncertainty, Jake knew he was on the precipice of transformation. But would he muster the fortitude to confront both external skeptics and his self-doubt simultaneously? The answer hovered just beyond his reach, intertwined with ambition and fear. The following week arrived with the weight of anticipation pressing on Jake's shoulders. The workshop was set for the next evening, and every day leading up to it felt like a countdown to an exam he knew could change his life. He spent long hours preparing, infusing his presentation with moments of vulnerability he hoped would resonate. Yet lurking at the edges of his enthusiasm was a pervasive fear. What if no one showed up? What if those who did arrived equipped with the very judgments he feared? With the event a mere hours away, Jake paced his apartment, hands buried deep in his pockets. The walls seemed to close in on him, reflective of the doubts colliding in his mind. His once clear conviction to lead this workshop felt increasingly fragile. What had compelled him to embrace this uncertain path, to reveal himself to his peers, knowing they would scrutinize? The juxtaposition of ambition against the dark specter of doubt made every moment fraught with tension. As the clock struck 5, Jake glanced at himself in the mirror. It felt like an echo of the man who had stood before the town meeting just weeks prior. That moment had catalyzed a spiritual awakening for him, and the energy pulsed beneath the surface still. The time had come to step into his truth and solidify his transformation. Before heading to work, he found a quiet space in the backyard. The crisp air invigorated him. Closing his eyes, he mentally revisited his objectives and reflected on everything he had learned since that fateful meeting night. Each challenge had become a stepping stone, carving out a deeper connection to his authentic self. His commitment to community now brushed against his aspirations, merging purpose with passion. As he arrived at the venue, Jake felt the electric tension of possibility surrounding him. Colleagues began filtering into the room, glancing around with curiosity, a mixture of skepticism and intrigue hanging in the air. To his surprise, several familiar faces greeted him with genuine smiles, reinforcing the sense of community he had longed for. Once everyone settled, Jake stood in front of the audience, acutely aware of how his heart raced, but also of how this day was a culmination of his evolution. "Thank you all for coming," he started, attempting to project confident sincerity. "I stand here not just as your colleague, but as a fellow human being, eager to explore the intricate layers of our lives together." As he shared his narrative, weaving through the threads of his past failures and current aspirations, he observed the gradual softening among the audience. They leaned in closer, captivated by the truths he laid bare. His vulnerability ignited sparks in the room. Individuals began sharing snippets of their own stories, weaving a tapestry of interconnected experiences and dreams. With each person who spoke, the atmosphere transformed. The initial fear of judgment dissipated like a morning fog, replaced by a collective courage. This workshop became a sanctuary, an arena for echoing voices silenced for too long. Jake felt every shared story as a brick in the foundation he was constructing. Compassion and understanding anchored it. By the end of the evening, something palpable shimmered in the audience, a renewed sense of purpose and connection. He could see it reflected in their eyes, and as they mingled afterward, laughter mingling with the resonance of honesty, Jake felt an overwhelming sense of accomplishment.
He had carved a space for deep conversation and understanding, an architectural triumph built from not just walls but shared vulnerability. In the days following the workshop, Jake received messages from those who participated, thanking him for forging this path. The validation was astonishing. Conversations cropped up at the office, initially tentative but growing more profound. Ideas of future workshops took root. They didn't want this connection to fade. People shared thoughts of continued collaboration, discussions on integrating vulnerability into professional settings. Jake's confidence blossomed. He had stepped from the shadows into a role that defined him. The acknowledgement he received was not just validation of his efforts, but a testament to his true self emerging from beneath the layers of fear. He finally felt recognized for who he was, a catalyst for change, not only in his life, but in the lives of others. Looking back, Jake realized the echoes of doubt that once gnawed at his resolve had fueled his growth. He had conquered fears, turning them from shackles into the very tools that propelled him forward. No longer a ghost cleaning the shadows of others' failures, he now stood firmly recognized in his worth, channeling his architect's eye
into building an emotionally rich communal space. His past, once cloaked in regret, had been reframed as a vital part of his journey. With every new connection, he affirmed that personal struggle could become professional achievement. Jake had not only achieved inner growth, but had also sparked a movement among his colleagues toward a more empathetic workplace. That evening, as he reveled in the reflections of the workshop, gazing at the sketches spread before him, he felt an undeniable clarity. His vision as an architect now transcended physical structures. It encompassed designing lives built on understanding, compassion, and the transformative power of shared experiences. This was his moment, the moment he had claimed as an architect of more than buildings, but as a vibrant community of dreamers, resilient in their authentic paths. And with that realization, he embraced the boundless possibilities ahead, ready to manifest his purpose every day. Now it's your turn to unite with the spirit of personal transformation. Don't wait any longer to make a difference in your own life. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss exclusive emotional stories that empower. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and spread the inspiration for change. Comment your reactions and theories about this exhilarating journey. Your voice matters. And share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion, because this is the moment to show your support for stories that uplift and inspire. Take action now.